The atmosphere in the Today Show studio was unusually electric that morning, a subtle tension humming beneath the usual cheerful chatter. The lights glared brightly overhead, reflecting off the polished desk and the perfectly arranged coffee mugs, highlighting the faces of the audience who sat waiting, murmuring excitedly. Something about the air made it clear that this wasn't going to be an ordinary interview. Whispers traveled quickly, a ripple of speculation passing through the rows of spectators. Keanu Reeves was about to appear. Known for his calm, almost enigmatic presence, Keanu had cultivated a reputation that made his every appearance feel significant, and the audience could sense that something exceptional was about to happen. The green room door opened, and Keanu stepped through with his familiar understated elegance. He wore a black blazer over a dark shirt and jeans, his hair slightly tousled, his expression neutral but attentive. Despite his quiet demeanor, he carried a presence that seemed to command attention without demanding it. The audience clapped politely, some whistles punctuating the applause, though it wasn't exuberant. It was curious, a mix of respect and anticipation. Cameras pivoted toward him, capturing every careful step he took toward the desk. He nodded slightly to the crowd, offering a small smile, his eyes calm yet sharp, as if aware of every gaze upon him. Craig Melvin stood from his chair to greet him, the usual morning warmth in his smile paired with a subtle edge, signaling that today's interview might tread beyond pleasantries. "Keanu, it's fantastic to have you here. Your schedule must be insane with all the recent projects, press tours, and appearances. How are you managing it all?" Keanu offered a small nod, his voice steady and measured. "Busy but good. Grateful for the work, for the people I collaborate with, and for the opportunity to do what I enjoy. That's what matters." For several minutes, the interview started smoothly. Craig asked about Keanu's latest film, the challenges he faced on set, and lighthearted anecdotes about interactions with fellow actors. Keanu responded with his trademark modesty, interspersed with dry humor and candid observations. The audience chuckled along at his understated wit, enchanted by the quiet depth he brought to every response. For a brief moment, the segment felt like any other. Professional, polished, entertaining, but safely within the boundaries of traditional talk show conversation. However, the tone began to shift subtly when Craig steered the discussion toward Keanu's presence in the public eye and the scrutiny he often faced. "Keanu, there's been a lot of commentary about you lately. Not just your roles, but the way you handle fame and criticism. Some say you're too reserved, that you avoid addressing issues directly. Others say your calm, measured responses are a welcome contrast in Hollywood. How do you respond to that?" Keanu's gaze remained steady, his voice soft but deliberate. "I don't avoid things. I focus on what I can control and on what I believe will have a meaningful impact. Reacting to everything that comes at you doesn't change the world. It just creates noise." Backstage, the air was a mix of controlled chaos and lingering disbelief. The studio lights from the main floor filtered in faintly through the doorway, casting elongated shadows across the green room. Crew members hustled past with headsets and clipboards, producers whispered urgently into microphones, and assistants darted back and forth with last-minute notes and water bottles. Amidst the organized frenzy, Keanu Reeves stood quietly near a corner, his hands tucked casually into his pockets, exuding the same calm, almost otherworldly presence he had on the set. Despite the storm of activity around him, there was an unmistakable aura of focus and composure about him, as though the world could surge and roar all around, and yet he remained untouched by its chaos. He took a slow, deliberate sip from a water bottle, letting the cold liquid steady his mind and settle the adrenaline still coursing through him from the on-air exchange. His assistant hovered nearby, a mixture of admiration and concern in her eyes. "Keanu, that was intense. Everyone's talking about it. That segment—" She paused, searching for words. "It wasn't just intense, it was unprecedented." Keanu nodded slightly, his gaze calm and steady. "It was intense, yes, but not unexpected. I understood where the conversation might go. I just chose to engage only to the extent that felt truthful and meaningful." The assistant glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. Craig and the crew, everyone's shocked. People aren't used to seeing someone handle tension like you did. Most would get flustered, defensive, or over-explain. You didn't. You were you. A faint smile flickered on Keanu's lips, a rare and subtle acknowledgement. That's the idea. You respond to the situation with honesty, not reaction. There's power in being deliberate rather than reactive. It's not about being untouchable. It's about clarity and intention. A gentle knock on the door interrupted the quiet moment. Keanu glanced up. "Come in," he said, voice even and calm. Craig Melvin stepped through the door, his usual morning energy tempered with seriousness. His brow was furrowed and his hands were clasped in front of him as he approached Keanu. "Keanu, I just wanted to check in," he said, his tone a mixture of apology and respect. "That was more intense than I expected, and I didn't intend to push things into that territory." Keanu's expression remained neutral, his eyes steady. "I understand, Craig. I know your questions were meant to probe and to challenge. I simply reached the point where continuing would no longer serve the purpose of meaningful dialogue. It became a test of principle rather than discussion." Craig nodded slowly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I get that, and I respect that. I mean, you handled it in a way most people simply wouldn't. You didn't just maintain composure, you controlled the exchange without raising your voice, without theatrics. That's remarkable." Keanu inclined his head slightly, calm and deliberate. "It's not about control. It's about integrity and clarity. I answer when I can contribute thoughtfully. I step back when I cannot. That's the difference between engagement and performance." Craig's eyes widened slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Performance. Most people would have tried to perform for the cameras, to appease the audience or the hosts. But you didn't. You didn't try to be anything other than yourself. That's rare and refreshing." Keanu allowed himself a subtle exhale, a quiet acknowledgement of the truth in Craig's words. "It's about authenticity. Acting for appearances or drama is counterproductive. Real influence comes from honest, deliberate action, not spectacle." The assistant, still hovering nearby, nodded, clearly impressed. "Social media is already exploding with clips. People are dissecting every word, every glance. It's going to be everywhere by lunchtime." Keanu's eyes met hers calmly. "That's beyond my control. I can't manage interpretation or speculation. I can only manage my response and actions." "That's enough." Craig took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Keanu, most people would feel pressured to explain themselves, to justify every move, especially after walking off live television. But you didn't flinch. You didn't over-explain. That's a level of composure I've rarely seen. I mean it." Keanu's lips quirked into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Composure doesn't come from being unaffected. It comes from understanding the situation and knowing the limits of what needs to be said or done. I wasn't flinching. I was choosing the right moment to disengage." Craig chuckled lightly, shaking his head in disbelief. "Choosing the right moment? Most people don't even know that moment when it hits. You made a deliberate choice in real time and you stuck to it. That's extraordinary." The faint hum of activity outside continued, reminders of the world waiting beyond the green room. Reporters were already recording, phones were rolling, and social media had lit up with reactions. But Keanu remained undisturbed, the calm eye in the storm of organized chaos. He adjusted the collar of his blazer slightly, his posture perfectly poised, his presence almost meditative in its focus. Craig smiled again, this time more openly. "You've set a standard today. Not just for interviews, but for how to handle pressure in general. I don't know if people at home realize what they witnessed. They saw tension, but they also saw someone stand firm without escalating. That's rare." Keanu's gaze softened slightly, a trace of warmth behind the calm exterior. "That's the goal. Not to dominate or impress, but to communicate with clarity and integrity. If others learn something about presence or principle from it, that's an added benefit, not the purpose." Craig extended a hand toward him, a gesture of camaraderie and respect. "You handled yourself exceptionally, Keanu. Not many could have walked away like that and kept the integrity intact. You've taught a lesson without even saying it explicitly.